Okay, so now we're moving on to chapter 8 where we're going to talk about joints. We only cover the first 4 sections of this chapter. Other than this last section, which is section 4 on synovial joints, the rest of them are pretty brief. When you go to study this, I highly recommend you actually do not go into your textbook, only because there's way too much information in there that you will not be tested on. That I think is too much for an A&P1 course. So really for chapter 8 content, I would focus really just on the PowerPoints and these lecture recordings. So section 1 of chapter 8 is really just giving you an overview of how we classify joints. But first we'll talk about what exactly is a joint. So a joint can also be referred to as an articulation, and it's a place where 2 or more bones are going to be meeting. There's 2 basic categories in which we classify joints. One is a structural classification, and that's going to be dependent on the material that's actually binding the bones together and whether or not there's a cavity within the joint. Functional classification is our second type of classification for joints, and this is going to be based on the movement that's allowed by the joint itself. So if we're talking about structural classification, we have 3 different types. We have fibrous, cartilaginous, and synovial. I just put in parentheses here that we have 3 specific types of fibrous joints, 2 cartilaginous, and we'll talk about the different types of synovial. Synovial joints are the only ones that actually do have a cavity present, so that's why there's this little asterisk here. Fibrous and cartilaginous joints do not have a cavity present. When we go to functional classification, or the movement allowed by the joint, there's 3 specific types of movement. We have synarthroses, which means that the joint is immovable or not movable. When we're talking about amphiarthroses, that means we're talking about a slightly movable joint. And diarthroses means freely movable. So typically in our axial skeleton, or right down the midline of our body, is where we're going to find our immovable or slightly movable joints. So our synarthrotic and our amphiarthrotic joints. Our freely movable or diarthrotic joints are typically found in our appendages or our appendicular skeleton. And just one thing to kind of think about when we talk about the movement of these different joints is the less movable the joint means the more stable the joint is.